attending or accessing on a mobile device? And if so, I'm wondering if putting all of the links in chat is more useful than having them in a Google Doc. So if people can shout out if something isn't working for them, and we can try to fix that for you so that everyone has access to the links we need. And even if you can't access TIMS right now, you can perhaps access it another time. So, and sort of building on that, before I go into TIMS and all of that, I want to say that these workshops are ideally pretty collaborative, even though the what we're talking about here is sort of computer-based and on a website. It's actually harder to do it virtually than in like a computer lab. So feel free to unmute, to ask questions, to tell me to slow down, tell me to speed up, make comments. It's supposed to be a bit of a two-way street. So, okay. So not seeing any questions so far. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Garrett. I'm with UC Berkeley SafeTrek. I'm a program and policy analyst. And then this is part of the Focus Cities grant. Focus Cities is just an internal name for a project we have that focuses on providing technical assistance to a few cities across California. One of those is Santa Ana. And my colleague Clarissa is also on or part of the Focus Cities team with Catwalks. I don't know if you want to say anything first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Clarissa. I'm the community programs manager at California Walks, and I'm the lead there for providing technical assistance to the 7 focus cities in California. So feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to try pasting some things straight into chat here and see if it turns them into links. It does not. Okay, well, that's not going to work. Okay, so what I would like everybody to do before I start sharing my screen is navigate to the TIMS front page, if you like. Make sure you're registered for TIMS. That way you can sort of follow along by looking at your own community and your own area and thinking about that as I sort of walk us through sort of an example area. We also have links with this handout, and this handout contains everything that I am going to say, pretty much, all of those steps. So that is your big link. You can leave now. You're done. You're good. You can go have dinner. You've got that link, and then we'll go over Street Story at the end. I'll share the workshop at the end. But let me put these email addresses in here right now. You can always email me for support with TIMS or anything else we'll be looking at today. And if you or a community member or someone you're working with would prefer expert help in Spanish, my colleague Anna knows honestly more about this than I do. All of it fluent in Spanish as well, which is quite an achievement. That said, the TIMS website is not in Spanish, so she can provide a lot of assistance on that, but the website is only in English. Okay, so looking at our time, we're good so far. I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to start learning about TIMS. Let me move this over here and share screen, that screen, share. Okay, so this should hopefully look somewhat similar to where you are, which is this front page of TIMS. Pull this over here so you can see everybody a little better. There we go. And I want to point out a few useful things on here. All of the things we're going to look at today are under tools, and so we'll be working our way through about half of these tools, the most relevant tools. But I want to navigate over to help here first. Let me get rid of this. It's really putting up a fight. Okay. It really is putting up a fight. I don't know why it's doing this. It's never done this before. The Zoom overlay like won't go away. I don't know why. So I apologize. I'm sorry. Can't click through the Zoom overlay. It's hiding all of the tabs I need. Something like that. Okay, I'm sure it looks dreadful on your screen. So please tell me if it's unreadable or I've messed something up. But I'm trying to show the TIMS help side. And help is maybe not the best word because help is like, oh man, a technical problem. But really, this is just everything about TIMS. And in particular, the TIMS code book is hiding under here. So, but this is reminding me that I've gotten ahead of myself once again. So TIMS is a Berkeley SafeTrek created online set of tools for accessing SWITRs. Some of you know what SWITRs is. Some of you may sort of fuzzily remember. SWITRs is the statewide traffic records, statewide integrated traffic record system, it says right there. And that is, so it's important to keep in mind, it is police reported injury traffic collisions. So their property damage collisions are not closely tracked in this at all. And it's all police reported collisions. So that is going to be a limitation that we return to again and again, because we will see the evidence of that sort of aspect of it when we look at some of the data. So it's appropriate that there's a lot of information about SWITRs here on TIMS. And in particular, when we get to looking at some of the nitty gritty, we're going to need a code book to tell us what each of the variables mean. And so under here, under help, what is SWITRs? Here we see all sorts of like data structure and stuff, which is not, I mean, it's important and helpful, but it's maybe not the most pressing thing everybody thinks of. But these sorts of things are much more important, where they're just gonna be like a number in the data and you need to know what that number means. And so here is your code book. So I just wanna put that, start there, because that's another helpful sort of place to start all by itself. Okay. So first off, we're going to start with, my tabs, they're all out of order. How did I manage this? Let's find the right tab. No, let's just create it from scratch. Okay, so, oh man. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is we're going to look at the SRTS map viewer. And that is the first set of queries that we see here on our agenda. So TIMS queries 1 and 2. And the Safe Routes to School map viewer is useful because it's a quick way to look at a specific point and the pedestrian and bicycle collisions around it. So it's the quickest way to get quick information. I see there may have been a chat there. My voice a little glitchy. Yeah, it might be. I've tried to turn off everything else that's using the internet, but my internet might go out. So please tell me if you missed something and you need me to repeat something. And I can't. I apologize. Okay. So what I'll do is I've gone over to Google Maps, gone to Santa Ana, and I've already decided that I want to look at the First Street and Bristol Street intersection. So I'm just zooming in. I'm going to grab this nice church here. I'm going to copy their address. I'm going to find my tab again. There it is. Paste it in. Boom. Okay. And so any of you can do that very easily with, home address. If you do that, do not, show the rest of us your home address. With a school address, any address you think of. And that's a very, very quick and easy way to take a first look. And so I'm going to walk through this first look in maybe sort of like painful detail, but it's because it's important to look at a lot of these things the very first time. So first off, we see our filters at the top. We're only looking at bicycle and pedestrian collisions, and they're all coming from SWITRs. So they're only injury collisions, only police reported. So we have to keep these caveats in mind. We can see the 4 different collision severities here, ranging from fatally injured to complaint of pain. We can see the years here. And the years are important because it comes default, but often we want to widen our years out a little bit. So here we have, that's 5 years. Okay, now scroll. So here we see our map. So this shows us with little icons, the pedestrian and bicycle collisions superimposed on Google Maps around our intersection. And so the symbols help make this, I think, very like at a glance, very approachable at a glance. You can take a screenshot of this and roll with it. So it by itself can be a powerful thing. We can see little hints of where, we can see big hints of where there might be issues, right? We see 2 fatal pedestrian collisions along First Street. We see a whole number of severe pedestrian collisions along Bristol Street, like almost every one of these big cross streets. And then we see a number of more minor, but still obviously quite a number of biking collisions along First Street here. So, and that is one of the reasons we talked about a few different places. I picked this one is because there were a lot of things to look at here. So the downside of this view is that we can see that there are symbols clustered and they are, it's sort of difficult to see how many symbols there might be in a place. Like in particular down here at Willett Street, over at Myrtle Street, there's a number of symbols that are stacked that we just can't see. And so there's other ways, obviously, we have to get that data. The final thing we can learn from the map here is if we click on a collision, you can get a lot of information about that one collision. So if you want to zoom in, or if you're looking at an area and there's just a few severe collisions, it's an easy way to grab more information about that. So I've taken, actually, I'm gonna look at this collision down here because I looked at this intersection a little more. This Myrtle Street intersection. So this is 2015, it was a severe pedestrian collision. We can verify that yes, it was at Bristol and Myrtle. Then we can click here and it opens up in a new tab a bunch of additional information about this collision. So as I said, it's a good way to get a lot more information about one collision. We can see the parties who are involved. So we can see that there is a driver, type of vehicle, the responding officer determined that they were at fault. We can see some demographic information about the victims, both the driver and the pedestrian in this case. We can see the weather, we can see the violation category, and we'll talk more than a little bit about that further on. And then we can see the street view here. So we can see the current day street view of where this collision took place. And so I will say, obviously the street view is very powerful and it's very like at a click, so it's very easy to see it. The downside is that, especially like this happened in 2015, the street could have changed since then. That's always true with street view, even if you're looking at it, just a year ago, the street still could have changed since then. So you always have to take street view with a grain of salt or two. The final thing I'll note here is that we can learn a lot from this. We see that the driver was proceeding north, so they were driving along, they were proceeding straight. They're proceeding along the road. We see that the pedestrians' direction and movement weren't indicated. On the others in this area, they were indicated, and perhaps unsurprisingly, for the others at least, and perhaps for this one as well, pedestrians are trying to cross this street here, where there's a few food trucks, there's a number of there's a pharmacy, other commercial destinations, and yet you have this big road, 6 lanes, all told, a little island, but it's, and unmarked, technically speaking, unmarked crosswalks, and so maybe something that sort of is pretending to be a pedestrian island. Anyway, I don't want to go into that detail. That's more like a walk assessment thing. I'm just sort of showing that already you can have a strong set of findings just from this one tool. Cluster collisions, some severe collisions. You can immediately start looking at what the drivers are doing, what the pedestrians were doing, or cyclists, and get an idea of what's going on at an intersection. So that is how powerful that tool is just at sort of a click, just at a quick glance. And then the second query here is sort of the same thing, but it's what the tool is made for, which is safe routes to school. So if we went to Orange County, Santa Ana, we've got a list of schools that we could look at here. So I think one of the other areas that we talked about was Cesar Chavez. And this is on the other side of town, so it's obviously different things. But here we could see very quickly at a glance once again. Here's the high school. Here's pedestrian and bicycle collisions around it. We can see down here on Warner, and Main, we see a number of severe bicycle collisions, including one bicycle fatality in 2019. Oh my goodness. So, some very, very relevant things happening. And then you could look on that, look further and see, are they school-aged folks? What's going on here? So I'm going to scroll to the bottom here and show you the final element of all of this, which is the summary statistics, which we could have looked at for the other one as well. It shows two different radiuses, right? One within a quarter mile and then one within this sort of like quarter to half mile. And typically when we look at this, the quarter to half mile is a larger number. And I have to, remind folks that, well, actually that quarter mile is, if I remember correctly, it's 1/4 of the total area. So you'd expect the outer number, all else equal, to be 3 times as high. In this, that isn't the case. It's even though there's less area in that quarter mile radius, there's still a lot more collisions and a lot more severe collisions in that quarter mile radius. So if you were doing sort of a safe routes to school analysis, immediately this would like ring alarm bells, because clearly like in the area near the school, there's collisions happening and severe collisions happening that are even like more and more severe than the collisions further out in this area. And then finally, we have a list of collisions down here at the bottom, including case IDs, which we will explore in a little bit. So I won't go into detail with all of this other than, it's just sort of showing its work. Just sort of like if you do look at something and you do want to get into more detail, you have your collisions list here that you can start working off of. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Okay, so I think we're doing quite well time-wise. So I wanted to slow my roll briefly and see if we have any questions, comments, any thoughts yet? Anything we can share that someone is a little thoughtful about?
I have a question. When you're on the front page, did you say we go to tools and then do the Switter's GIS map, or which one do we go to?
So for this, you'd go to tools, and this was SRTS map viewer. We'll do GIS map next. And if anyone has like a question about one of these specifically, we'll talk about GIS map, we'll talk about query and map. I can briefly talk about the others if folks are interested, but we just did SRTS map and we'll do these two next. And I'm going to post another link that I didn't share before, which is to our Jamboard. And on our Jamboard, sort of, we have this, I don't know, my half-baked idea. I don't know, it's just a way of trying to encourage folks to share out their own things, do their own things, share out any interesting findings they find. And so like I've shared out like the map we'll be looking at next year. But on the following pages, if folks like have an interesting screenshot, and I think that like it's more likely that people will like discover more interesting things in the steps we're about to be doing. But feel free to like post in here. If you're interested in talking about it, you could put your name in a little sticky note on the side. If not, It's just a way to show what we're doing, showing what we're thinking about. And so that's why I said, don't, if you've searched like from your house, like don't put your house's address on there. But you know, if you've like drawn a shape around your neighborhood, which we're going to learn about how to do next, that would be a really neat thing to put here. All right. And I do see that we have a mobile user. So and I understand that this is not, the website is not mobile friendly, and this sort of way of sharing may not be all that mobile friendly either. So do feel free to look at these resources later, email for these resources later. We can definitely make this work for you if you're curious, but not able to follow along with us as perfectly as you'd like right now. Okay, with that, I will move on. And Jamboards, they're crazy, right? They do everything with everything. So yeah, no worries, no worries. Thank you for being here. This stuff's so important. So anything we can do to help folks answer questions, go over all of this is just good stuff. So thank you. Okay. And now I have to navigate between the waiting room and the screen sharing. I don't know why Zoom is being this way today. It's different every day. I don't know why. Okay, so next we're going to go to a tool that's not as quick and easy, but is a lot more powerful. And that is going to Switter's GIS map here. And it'll load. And this might be causing my internet to be a little grumpy. So much we can do. Click through. Okay, so here's what you get when you first open Switter's GIS map is year and then ways to narrow it down. And let's see, just put orange, put it in Santa Ana here. I'm going to keep it on 2018 right now, just because I've already got it in a different tab. But you obviously would want to think about what years you want to click. I will say that through 2019 is good, is ready to go. 2019 is in pretty good shape. 2020, unsurprisingly, like everything else in 2020, is a little funny. Oh yeah, thank you, Dorian, for sharing the agenda out again. And so the 2020 data is, A, it's gonna be weird when it does get finalized, and B, it's not really finalized yet. So 2020, we can't, or 2020, I would, depending on what you're looking at, I would stop and look at the data from 2020 alone and see if it's ready to be included yet, and maybe give it a few months here. Because throughout the year, it'll get improved. That's what happens every year. So then the final filter I want to mention is making sure we include bicycle and pedestrian. And it'll, well, that's not true. So hopefully that doesn't impact our search here. So it'll just pop this up that says that you want to include pedestrian and bike, but it says pedestrian or bike. Don't think too hard about it. I think it makes sense to the programmers. I think for the rest of us, we mean pedestrian and bike, mean both pedestrian and bicycle collisions. We don't mean only collisions that involved pedestrians and bicyclists. So just click yes on both. This will pick the right thing by default, and then you'll click show result, and it'll think. And there we go. There we go, collisions in Santa Ana. The one caveat I will say about this, it's very important to keep in mind, is if you're doing things in Los Angeles or LA County, the numbers can get too big for it to show all of your results. And so it'll only be able to show 5,000 mapped at a time. In that case, you will need to narrow the scope. You could break a year into like 6 months. You could search for pedestrian and then bike. In this case, there are not that many collisions, which is good, right? That's always good news. So we can search for them together. So we can see the dots here. This, I'll show you what we can do with these dots. First, we can search in the cluster, which is useful because it sort of shows where clusters of collisions are. So here we see the cluster at First and Bristol. That's in clusters are imperfect. So like Myrtle is somewhere down here, the one we're looking at before, and we know there were several collisions there. There aren't any right here right now. That's because of the way it marks up the clusters. So actually, probably because I picked 2018. So that's probably the other reason. It's not showing up the same data. The other thing is if we go back to point, and we'll symbolize by collision severity, which is obviously very important. We can see the colors pop out a little more for our fatal collisions. And the severe collisions are in sort of this sort of lime green, which is maybe not the most ideal color, but they kind of pop too. But the fatal collisions really pop a lot. And so this is obviously a very important view to get them to be more visible. There's also other ways to look at collisions that I won't go into. So what I'm going to do next, and this is sort of the real power of this tool, is going to tools up here and then select collisions. And you get a whole bunch of different ways to select a collision. And what we are typically doing, either in a neighborhood of a city or in an unincorporated area, is we've talked to community members and we're trying to map out what that community is. It also works for going along corridors. So like last year, we were looking at this Fairview corridor. And so we sort of traced out along the corridor. Oh man, that was a little laggy. Like this, and double click to finish. And you've selected well, that was an ugly job, but we selected a corridor of collisions there. And then you would then go to download collisions. So back up to tools, download collisions. So if you don't like that, you can clear your selection. And so in this case, what I did is I just went half mile. So there's the same, more or less the same thing we saw in the SFGS viewer. And I just put my half mile dot right at the center of the intersection. So, so that gives you a general area, right? Like if you don't know what else you're looking at, that's another way of getting more detailed information on general area. I will say that this is, this is sort of a blunt tool as well, right? But then any sort of like, I don't know anything about the communities that I'm looking at here, which is obviously not ideal. And so in that case, I don't really know like what to include. Like, should I be making sure to include all the collisions at this intersection? If I clicked over here instead, I would include maybe like half the collisions at that intersection. So you do want to be mindful of like where you're drawing your lines and not like arbitrarily excluding or including any collisions. So, but no matter what you do, once you've got your collisions, the thing we're doing here is we're going and we're just clicking download collisions. Mapped will produce all of the collisions from Santa Ana. Selected will produce the collisions that you've selected. And then data file type, for our purposes today, we're just looking at collisions. We'll be able to get information about parties and victims from that collision data. If you have questions, this is a little more advanced, we don't want to go super into it, but if you have questions or you're trying to figure out which data file type you want, once again, you can go to the code book and you'll see collision level, party level, and victim level. And so that's, the code book explains like the differences between these things. For the most part, you can start with collision and then, drill in from there if you need to. Okay, find my map again here. Okay, and then you would download it and it will download a CSV. I'm not going to download that because I already have a CSV that I'm just going to use. I want to point out a few more things here. Maybe while people, if they're following along, give them a chance to follow along a little more. Though we are, I notice, on the other side of time. So maybe I will just sort of grab my document here. I don't see any questions. So, okay. So your CSV should look something like this. And this is like raw, like Switter's data. This is the Switter's data. And the whole point of TIMS is that you don't have to sit here and like construct pivot tables for all of this. Could oftentimes when you see something funny on TIMS, you want to go back to your CSV. So you'll want to keep your CSV around. You can also download it as collisions. And so typically you want to rename it. So I've renamed this up here, like very, very detailed. I don't always do this. I'll end up with like collisions like 37 in parentheses, and then I won't know what I'm doing. The bottom line here though, is all you need to do is grab this case ID column and just copy it. So just click the column, Control C, and that's all you need from this to move forward in TIMS. Because the next step is going to TIMS, is Switter's query and map. So once again, we see this sort of set of filters, year, county, everything. But we've already done all of that. We already picked our collisions on the map. So we can just go to query by case IDs and literally just paste it in. Or you could upload the CSV file. They should work exactly the same. Upon copy pasting your data in, you click load. And so basically the rest of our time here, my goodness, time passes, doesn't it? We'll be looking, I think, fairly quickly through these charts here. So that we can go into some of the data discussion because we can discuss what charts other people see. So I will just go through the charts in a broad manner. At the top here, we see our summary data. The summary data for the most part shouldn't be, well, you know, actually it will be, especially if you didn't look at the exact same numbers in the SRTS map. You may not have seen a summary of them before. We may have just seen them on the map. And so the summary up here can actually be quite helpful in telling you exactly how many collisions and how many victims of those collisions. And that's where your collision and victim data sets sort of differ, is because of course a collision can have multiple victims. You also see there was a motorcycle collision. We see the pedestrian and bicycle broken down. So here we have the collision severity. So the numbers of collisions of each sort of the worst injury suffered in each collision. The collision type is not very useful. Unsurprisingly, many of them are vehicle or pedestrian collisions or other. The day of week and time. This is a very important one. And this one is hard to make heads or tails of. Typically they are when you take bike and ped and you stuck them together, because this is both ped and bike data. So I would suggest a best practice that I haven't done here is to take the pedestrian data and the bicycle data and have two different Excel documents and upload them separately, look at them separately, because in a lot of communities, the pedestrian and bike like travel times or like times of day will be different, and the demographics will be different as well, and we'll see that in a moment. Finally, we'll look at the primary collision factors. These are just the broad categories of primary collision factor. So there's not a ton to learn about from these. You can see some speed, a lot of right of way, some things that were adjudged to be pedestrian violations. The next set of charts is our victim summary. So we see how many victims suffered injuries and what the degree of injury was. The role, once again, isn't terribly surprising, mostly pedestrians and bicyclists. The safety equipment doesn't tell us anything, especially since the only relevant thing would be if cyclists were wearing helmets or not, and there's not really consistent coding for like lots or blink are not stated. Some are motorcycle helmet not used. So it's not very consistent how that's written down. This obviously is very important. And once again, this is where it's important to have your pedestrian and bicycle data separated out so you can see if different groups of folks were affected in different ways. in the pedestrian and bike data. So, so I won't try to go into this here, just to note that, it's there. Then our third tab is specifically about pedestrian collisions. And everything here is pretty useful, but I do want to put out a caveat first about the violations. So we saw the broad categories of violations first, and these are the specific CVC codes. And we know that these are oversimplifications. So I would not make a lot of hay from specific violations, and this top one is a great example. So it says it's driver failure to yield to pedestrians in a marked or unmarked crosswalk, and that was 11 collisions were marked as that. If I click on this number, it takes me straight to the CVC code, and I can see, in fact, there are subsections here, and the subsections are marked in SWITRs. We just don't, they're not fully like analyzed in TIMS. So this is a weakness of TIMS, basically. And we see that subsection A indeed says a driver should yield the right of way to pedestrian. Subsection B says the pedestrians have a duty of care for their own safety when using a crosswalk. And some of these violations are going to be A, some of them are going to be B. So it's overly broad to say it's just driver failure to yield. So I want to include that is that this is good specific information, but it needs more. It's missing that subsection. And so if you are going to use CVC information in, like, if you're like writing a council member, doing some kind of analysis or some kind of advocacy, you need to make sure you account for the subsections. The others are also important. To open them all here. So here we can see what pedestrians were doing when they were the victims of a collision. So we can see most were crossing in a crosswalk at an intersection. Or crossing in a crosswalk that wasn't at an intersection. So only a few were not crossing, not in a crosswalk. 2 were walking along the road. Here we see the lighting. And this, once again, is always worth noting, like numbers at dawn or dusk, or numbers in the dark with street lights or without street lights. Often in rural areas, we see a lot of dark, no street lights. So that's obviously important to note. And then by weather, this may not change all that much in some areas. It might change different amounts in some areas more than others. The last thing, I know I am a little over time here, but the last tab I want to look at is our map. And this way of looking at the data, the map shouldn't be a surprise. We know exactly what we just grabbed in the map, but it still can be useful. A little busy, but we can see the numbers in clusters. The useful thing here is a heat map. So we can see some of our clusters in sort of heat map form. So we see obviously our darkest cluster here at First and Bristol, but we see clusters at some of these other intersections we noted as well. And then there's a few overlays here, like a bike route, or like, as we all are probably familiar with, like the notional bike routes, traffic overlay. I don't really know how useful that would be, but it could be. Yeah, so that's, I guess it's a good double check to make sure that you're looking at the right geographic area. All right, so that is all for that sort of second session, or the second section of our discussion. And so I want to open it up to any questions, anything folks would like to share. Is there anything we want to start off with? Did we lose anybody at some point? And we'd love to help you get caught up if we could. See if we have anything on our jam board here. That's all. If you do have anything for the jam board, or if you have anything you want to shout out, feel free to unmute.
I just have a question. So the purpose of TIMS is just to like let the user know where there has been injury, and this is just like how to work TIMS. And I think just the more you use TIM, like the more you'll be able to like efficiently efficiently use it to like see where there has been injuries? Is that what that's for?
Yeah, yeah. That is one use of it, yes, is just to see where there were injuries. And I think that is a very important note, is it's only where there were injuries. So you are missing like local knowledge of hazardous areas that there haven't been injuries, or sort of a local knowledge of what infrastructure there isn't. So it is helpful, and I should have said this at the beginning, so thank you for reminding me this as well. It is important when doing an application or maybe doing advocacy work, but applying for a lot of funding, often wants like often the collision data from SWITRs is really important. They really want that like hard data. And so being able to like show, in TIMS, or show some sort of analysis, like, oh, there's disproportionately, pedestrians and bicyclists, being severely injured in this corridor. Even though like the community knows it, people know it on the ground, sometimes the TIMS data can help like strengthen that argument for funding, for example.
And is this just police report based, or is it also like user based, whereas in like a user could also upload information of an accident or such?
Right, so it's only police reported injury collisions.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really important note, because obviously there are communities that have different relationships with the police and are less likely to report collisions. If they don't need to. They're going to rely on local support networks more than, calling up, the sheriff's department or whatever, to come on down. In rural areas, well, there's a lot of different reasons that rural areas have some higher like proportions of severe and fatal collisions. But one of those is that, if folks have, a minor injury, but it's okay, they can still drive away from it, they may do that rather than trying to get the sheriff's office involved or the CHP involved. Right. So that's a very, very important thing to know.
Yeah. And do you guys think that TIMS will be an app in the future? Just because I feel like if you're out on the road, having an app version of it would be easier for cyclists or pedestrians to like look up collision sites. Is that something you guys think you guys will be working on?
So I wrote that down when you or someone else mentioned it at the beginning. I wrote it down, and that is it's not the traditional use, I think, in the ways that the folks who have developed it have thought about it.
Yeah.
Is like they're thinking about like people applying for grants and people doing advocacy work.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, it could make a lot of sense for it to be like maybe some quicker information, more readily accessible.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's easy to imagine, because we all know apps that like know your location or ask for your location, right? Like what if like TIMS or like some type of TIMS was able to like ask your location and then show you collisions or headlight collisions or Thank you. So I've written, I obviously can't promise anything, of course. Depends on what if OTS wants to fund it.
I remember hearing about this workshop and I was like looking to see if there was an app, just because I'm a millennial and like in this day and age, I'm just like, oh, it'd just be more easier, more convenient for me. But like, I definitely see where like the programmers or people doing grants and stuff would benefit from having a website.
Right. Thank you. All right, and Cynthia, you raised your hand.
Yeah, hi. I want to thank you for going over and reviewing that, and thank you to SAS for hosting this too. I was wondering that spreadsheet that you downloaded from the TIMS, can you upload that to like the My Maps in Google and stuff like that, to create like other maps? I'm just curious, like, and to be able to like overlap data. I love the idea of data and having all of this knowledge now, but I also find it to be kind of abstract and a little bit dehumanizing too. You know, it turns all these life-changing experiences and life-eliminating experiences into like numbers and dots and stuff, and I find that really jarring. And I feel like there's definitely strength in having this data for advocacy efforts, but also I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of like narrative lacking to these numbers, and I think, you know, being able to overlay information in a way that like gives more dignity to these stories and places. So I'm just curious if like you can export that data and upload it into like other map forms to yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Thank you for saying that. That's something we struggle with a lot. Is how do you do the dual tasks of like, you know, like reporting the data and like, in a sense, like trying to like respect people's memories by like helping communities get the funding, right? And fight for the improvements that they need. But also you're absolutely right, is that, you know, we saw, you know, some of those collisions we were looking at, you know, fatal and severe, so life-changing collisions, family-changing collisions, and we're there looking at sort of what the police were able to determine about the directions. Like, that's not right. We're lacking a narrative. We're like, how did this happen? And we're there sort of sleuthing it together. And that's where, you know, I can't repeat it enough, the community element, not just community knowledge, but also, yeah, community narratives, community experiences are incredibly important. So I definitely hear what you're saying. And so to answer the technical part, so I don't know about Google Maps as My Maps. I don't know specifically about that. But I will say that if you scroll all the way over in that Excel document to the farthest set of columns, we have latitude and longitude. So there are latitude and longitude points of every collision. And so I know a little bit more about like GIS, and from what I know with GIS, like that's good enough to like put these into like a GIS layer and things like that. So my belief is that that X and Y data should be enough to do a lot of other things with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, great questions. Do we have any charts? Okay, no maps yet. I'll keep trying. Has anyone like followed along in a different area and seen anything that they have questions about or surprises about? It's so difficult because like in a computer lab, you'd be able to go and see other screens. And here it's a little more difficult. So all we can do is ask folks if they have anything to share. And if not, that's all right. I don't know, I've got other things I want to share, but I'm worried that they will like pile on more things because they're less relevant. So let's see. We talked a little bit more about some of the other things in the pull down here. The motorcycle collision map shows motorcycle collisions, and it's so, which are obviously like not something we talk about, but are obviously a source of a lot of injuries and fatalities. So something that someone is thinking a lot about. And then this tool, which we actually were just talking with them about the other day, it's just an ATP tool. If folks are familiar with the ATP, the Active Transportation Grant Program, which is an important annual series of grants that a lot of communities have used to improve active transportation in their communities, this tool is designed to like work very closely with people's ATP applications. And it allows folks to select pretty, select collisions in a different sort of way. Move through me quickly here. It shows a summary here up here already, even though all we've done is pulled from the city. It shows a citywide heat map already. And then it's designed to have like project areas. So you put like a project area down. It's like, let's say, where was that? Where was our intersection? I want to say it's this one. The smallest is 3 miles, but that's because you zoom in even more closely. So you can then draw a shape. I don't know what this is. I'm just drawing a shape. Finish. And then you can see, so this is a way of getting those SRTS symbols. Though they're not, on the SRTS map, they're in the proper order where the more severe collisions are on the top. Here, they're still, I don't know why they didn't use the same code. But some of the more severe collisions are hidden underneath, unfortunately, which makes it more difficult to read. But it is a way to get that more symbolic view in a quicker way. And then down here are lots of options for integrating it into your ATP application. They don't really work if you don't have an ATP application. So it's a really useful, neat tool. It definitely still needs a little bit more polish on it. So, but it's really neat right now. All right, and then I guess if there's no more questions or comments, I can move forward and talk about Street Story a little bit. So, and then we have the next workshop in April is going to be, my understanding is it's going to focus primarily on Street Story. And so one of my colleagues, Jara, who leads the Street Story program, is going to be there going through Street Story in a much more detailed way. But we've already had some questions today that sort of ask about things along the lines that Street Story kind of helps to solve. Talking about missing, first of all, missing collisions, right? You know, can community report collisions, not to the police? Can they report unsafe areas before a collision has happened? That would be the ideal thing, right? What are some of the other ways that we can like talk about unsafety, you know, traffic safety, pedestrian safety, bike safety, you know, with beyond like this sole lens of, you know, police reported data, and how can people share like experiences that they've felt. And so Street Story is a partial solution to a lot of those questions. So here I've navigated to streetstory.berkeley.edu. Let me put this in chat as well here. Find chat. There we go. And I will say that unlike TIMS, which is also only in English, which is another pressing thing to ask OTS for money for, is to get it translated. Street Story is translated. So Street Story is in English and in Spanish. I'm gonna put the Spanish link here as well. Okay, that works. That's the Spanish link. Okay. And let me show you what this looks like since we have a little more time here. So just type in Santa Ana. And so that zooms in on the area. And the basic use of Street Story is that either you have an experience or you know of an unsafe street, and you didn't necessarily have a collision on it, hopefully, but something dangerous happened to you. And I think both as pedestrians and cyclists, we all sort of have an idea in our mind of something that like made our heart race, made us feel unsafe, made us maybe pick a different intersection in the future or a different route maybe, but isn't ever going to show up in anybody's data set because nothing happened, thank goodness. Maybe because of some action we took to avoid harm, which is good, but still means that things need to change, right? So here you would pick a specific, you'd think about, did it happen at a specific location, or is it a route, like along a street, something happened? So I click point here for a specific location. Now I'm talking about like maybe the Myrtle, or my, here we go. So like, here's this Myrtle Bristol crossover here. So I click it, I can see on the little snapshot here through the same. And here, feedback is broken into 4 different groups based on whether it was a crash, a near miss, a hazardous area, or a hazardous thing in the street, or hazardous street design, you know, who knows? Or conversely, a safe place. And that's also something we want to emphasize that also won't appear in crash data, is when a street is working, or when people feel safe near a park because there is more space to walk. Sort of good things that are present in communities as well. So I might click like, I don't know, like hazard or something. And you fill in details about what you were doing, what time it is, what made you feel unsafe. And then here's the sort of beauty of this is you just can tell your story. You can just put more information in there. Obviously up to a point, right? You don't want to put your name, you don't want to put anybody else's name, you don't want to put any of that personal identifiable information. And if a person does, we review everything before it goes on the map. So they do get anonymized, because that's the other part of the point, is that it will make things, is that these can't be traced back to any particular person. So you walk through that, make your entry, and then I'm just gonna cancel this because I don't want to make an entry. And then once you've made an entry, it would show up on the map, either as a point or a line, and you would see other entries people have made in the area. You can also look at data without putting any data in, if you click see data. And this should use what we've already put in, Santa Ana, to show some of the data. So we see a few people have reported crashes or near misses that they've suffered in Santa Ana. No one's reported any hazardous or safe places. And then once you get more reports, this sort of fills in a little more. And yeah, there shouldn't be any demographic data down here because it only fills in like once you have like a minimum of 50 reports. Obviously, once again, to prevent sort of personally identifiable sort of reporting from occurring. So this is a like open to the public, like open to communities way of reporting people's experiences, what has happened, what they see and feel in their community. And it's here in a virtual form, also pre-COVID and eventually post-COVID, we have our paper version as well. And this is often really, really important, the paper version in English and Spanish. So you can go have a community meeting and people can sort of sit around a table talking to each other about what they've experienced, about their stories. And then they write down their stories on the paper. And then, an advocacy organization or we can then enter it into the system. And so that's a way of like crossing the digital divide altogether, because you don't need any computer in the room, you don't need an internet connection. We've done this out in fields in rural areas, walking along and filling out, paper versions of Street Story. So it's really like versatile and ideally like open to people, open to advocacy organizations, community organizations, using it in a variety of different ways. And then sort of, amplifying the voice and experiences of the community. So that's your brief introduction to Street Story. Are there any questions or anything about Street Story? And if you're interested in learning more or experimenting yourself, or you're thinking in your mind, you want to report something, well, you can report something right now, but we will also have that longer training next month when Jara will go into a lot more detail about Street Story. I think that's tentative date is April 21st. Yeah. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn this back over to you, Dorian. All right.
Well, thank you, Garrett. That was really awesome to go through and learn. If anybody has anything to say, please say it in the chat, or if you wanted to put your email in the chat, Garrett. But other than that, I just wanted to thank you all for coming. I'm going to share my screen just to show you a few of our upcoming activities.
I have one more thing I need to shout out. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Corinne.
Yeah.
Here is my email and chat, and here is a link to an evaluation Google form. We're always looking to improve these. We've done this before. We'll do it again. So we're always looking to improve sort of what we talk about here. And so if you would like, we'd love it if you would comment on the evaluation, fill it out, and let me know how I did.
I just
So-
looked at the link and I'm not able to access it because it said
Oh.
closed.
Okay, I will work on that. I apologize. Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Dorian, and I will work on making sure this is actually open for responses. I'm sorry.
Okay. Just real quick, everybody. So the tentative date for the street story will be April 21st, and we'll update you on that on our website. If you know anybody who wants to take the BC Basics class in Spanish, we still have some spots available for this Friday. So the Friday version or portion is virtual, and then the next day they practice on their bikes for a few hours. And then if you want to know a little bit about our activities and programs, we do have our meetings every other Thursday from 6 to 7:30. So you can email me directly or text me if you want the Zoom link. So next month is April 1st and the 15th. And then we also want to give a shout out and a thank you to Garrett and Clarissa for being here. I know it's getting a little bit late, but those are just the announcements for now. And the link works, so please fill that out and give some feedback to Garrett. Anything else, anybody? Oh, you know, I forgot there is actually a raffle, so if you can stick around for one more minute. I have this name picker. It's super cool. So I'm gonna spin the wheel. I took out the people who left early so that we can all win something. So I think this should work. Okay. Okay. So he left. So that's one. Let me just erase his name. Next person.
This looks really fun.
Reminds me of the Wheel of Fortune, the Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One more prize. Let's see. Garrett.
No, you better spin it again. This is my job. I'm supposed to be here. Spin it again.
Okay.
It's so cute to see my name, but I'll I'll too pass so that the attendant.
Okay.
Prize.
One more time. Let's take these out. So let's see.
Karen.
Yay.
Sweet.
Awesome.
So I'll be
Drum.
contacting you about your prizes.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you so
night.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.